fear isn't here to scare you, but to fuel your next career move. Welcome to the Own Your BS show, a place where we help you to strengthen connections, conquer challenges, and claim your messages. I'm Cindy Tien. With me today, we have a very special co-host who is Karolina Gwinner. Karolina Gwinner is a leadership speaker specializing in sustainable high performance, where she empowers leaders to maximize their performance without compromising on their health and well-being. Karolina was recognized by LinkedIn as a top voice for her meaningful contributions, certified by the Neuro Leadership Institute, where she combines a solid foundation in neuroscience with her leadership expertise. She's a member of the Asia Professional Speakers Association, Association for Talent Development, and Keynote Women Speakers. Thank you for being here with us, Karolina.
Thank you so much, Cindy, for having me on the show today. I'm delighted to be here, and I've been living in Singapore for the last 11 years, but I'm originally from Poland. I actually lived in 5 different countries, so this made me, I think, a good candidate to talk about fear, because every time I relocated to a new country, I had to face some uncertainty and some fear. And through this, I think I learned a lot of lessons on how to face my fear. On the top of everything, I'm a mom of 2 active kids, and that makes me quite fearful of my weekends, because weekends are very intense for me. So yeah, let's dig in and let's talk about how do we overcome our fears and how do we face them in the first place.
You know, I really cannot wait to get started on this conversation with you, Karolina. I remember the first time we met, and I believe it was through the Speakers Association, which was almost 10 years ago. And there were a couple of things I really remember about you. The first thing is your energy and your contagious laughter. Every time we go into a room, I can hear your laughter from afar, and I always feel that, hey, you know, you're so magnetic. So there's this energy about you. The second thing I remember is that you are not just a hugger, you are a very tight hugger. Every time when you hug people, it's almost like, you know, I haven't seen you for 10 years, but maybe I just met you yesterday. And the third thing I really remember, when I suspect we're going to be talking quite a bit about that, is your dancing. I remember watching you dance one time, and I think we were at one of those gala dinners from our association, and you were just in your zone, doing your own thing, just taking charge of the dance floor. And I thought, wow, this person is truly living her life and living bravely for all of us to see. So super inspiring. That's why I'm so glad to be having you here, Karolina.
Thank you, Cindy. I actually remember about you the same. I remember a lot of energy, positive, vibrant, engaging energy, and this is why we connected so quickly. I don't remember that specific moment at the beginning, but I remember that through the years, we were evolving, growing, supporting each other. And of course, I would welcome you with a big hug, because why not, right? Hugging is for making people feel comfortable and welcome. And I always appreciated that we spent time with each other, we supported each other, we rooted each other on the journey. And look at us, like 10 years later, we are still doing amazing things. And I think a lot of lessons that we learned will be very valuable for people who are watching. And if someone is about to face their fear, we've been there, and we know how it feels, and we know that sometimes you need to breathe it out, sometimes you need to dance it out on the dance floor. There are different ways. Sometimes you just laugh at it, right?
So, you know, as we talk about fear, there are so many fears that we have, right? And today I really want to talk about specifically fear at the workplace.
Okay.
And even within the workplace, there are so many fears that people experience. So think about fear of speaking up during meetings. We think about fears about meeting somebody who's a lot more senior in networking events. We're going to be talking about that later. We also have people fearing about public speaking. I think that's a very common one. And I remember that was a very, very huge one for me. If I kind of share an experience of myself, this was probably about 18 years ago. I was working as a client manager in an American MNC.
Yeah.
And that time I was still quite new in the corporate world. So I remember in my role, I had to do a business review presentation for a client. So I'm very bad with the computer, very bad with administrative work. So there were 3 things that I remember it was so difficult. First and foremost, PowerPoint presentation deck. So that already is a beast of a project on its own.
Yeah.
The second thing I needed to do was to do a pivot table on Excel. Oh my God, that was scary for me because I'm a little bit dyslexic. So whenever I see numbers, I just go freaking blind. And the third thing is not just the PowerPoint and the Excel pivot table, I also had to present those numbers to a client. And I remember that the presentation meeting was on a Monday morning. So I was so flustered, so scared. I had to spend the entire weekend just trying to get myself ready for this session. And I was so afraid. And by Sunday, I was just panicking, high anxiety. And I didn't know what to do. And I remembered, you know what, Cindy, now you've just got to breathe and just take a little break. So I took a break. And at that time, I thought, you know what, I am going to listen to somebody inspiring. So at that time, we still have CDs. So I popped on this CD. It was a CD and it was a little sermon. And it was by this preacher. Her name is Joyce Meyer, somebody I really admire. And she was talking about this topic of fear. And I remember she said something like, even if you feel fear, it doesn't mean that you cannot do it. Do it afraid. And that was the moment I suddenly realized that, hey, I don't have to just feel the fear. I can actually dance with fear. Yeah, so what has been your experience with fear and how has that sort of, brought you to where you are today?
Cindy, I've been dancing with fear quite a lot. Thank you for bringing it closer to my world and my perception of the world. Actually, I had similar experiences. At the beginning of my career, I discovered that I'm so scared of presenting even not to a high-profile client, but even to a group of colleagues. I actually felt really self-conscious. And I was really afraid of making a mistake. One of the reasons is after my studies, I left the country and I relocated to Ireland, where most of the people were native speakers. Because of that, I realized my English was kind of like book type of English, like we've done a lot of writing and a lot of reading, but I didn't feel very capable as a presenter or a speaker. And every single mistake, my Polish accent, everything was kind of like, I felt it works against me. So I also have to overcome a lot of this because the first presentation I've ever done, I remember after I finished the presentation, even though I memorized every single word, I couldn't recall any word from my presentation. I was so paralyzed with fear. I've done it. Everyone thought that it was good. I stumbled in the middle of it. It took some time to recover. But I just felt after that I must face this fear because otherwise it would stop me. Because it cannot be that I need to memorize every single word that I want to say. And I didn't want to deal with like such paralysis. So I had to take some action and dance with fear more often as well. To be sure that I have a way. Some ways would be breathing, for example, right? But I have a way to deal with fear and get in control of my own mind.
I love that. There are so many techniques that we can actually use to sort of help ourselves manage fear. So tell me, how is dancing actually kind of help you with this? Because, I see you so carefree and I believe that this is sort of a little tip that you have as well because you're a speaker, I'm a speaker. I don't dance, but maybe I should learn to dance. So tell me, how has it helped you? I'll be so interested to find out.
I think you probably need to learn to dance because for me, dancing is big liberation. When I started to kind of see that I have a lot of fear in myself, I decided that I'm going to analyze what makes me me because I had this big fear of being really me, of being who I am. And I didn't know what makes me me and what makes me kind of like follow the expectation of all the other people. And this was a big problem because like if you are scared of being yourself, then it stops you, right? So for me, when I looked at my life, what I love doing and what I don't like doing, at one point I discovered that I was fighting a lot and I was trying to fulfill the expectations of my parents, of society, of other people. And this made me aware that very much I was behaving and I was raised as a warrior. I had to fight. I had to put on my armor that was kind of like, it felt like a prison. And I had to carry that. I couldn't admit that I had any weaknesses. I had to look like ready for the battle. I had to fight for what I wanted in life. And it didn't serve me. At one point, I felt really exhausted and I felt really disheartened because constant fighting, it takes a lot of strength. And then if you have any wounds, you cannot show them. You cannot ask for help because warriors don't. So it took me some time, and I was in this low point where I found, or rather dancing found me, because I was standing in a rainy day. I was standing on a bus stop, and I've seen the poster, come for joy and fun. And they had the trial class. It was a dancing school that advertised the joy and fun and happiness. And I wanted some of this. I was so tired with pushing and fighting and being strong. And I thought, okay, this is something that I need. I need more joy. I need more laughter. I need more energy. And I went for this dancing class, and I thought that it liberated me. It saved me. Because at this class, I realized dancing doesn't call me to be perfect. I could be imperfect. As long as I was listening to the music and I kind of follow the rhythm, and I went with the flow. And at that point, I also realized that I want that approach for my life. I want to go with the flow, and I want to allow myself missteps. Because in dancing, missteps are not fatal. Missteps are part of the dance. Sometimes you cannot follow the rhythm perfectly, but that's fine. It's not going to cause any big harm, right? And over time, I took that approach. I switched from being a warrior and being always strong to going with the flow more and embracing the imperfect side of me and kind of forgiving myself. If I made any misstep, that's fine. This is the part of the process. And the joy and the laughter and the hugging and a lot of this came as a result of dancing with life and dancing with fear as well. So yeah, this is my approach, and I hope that someone can get inspired with this. And I definitely want to see on the dance floor, because dance floor is the place where the moment I stopped being so concerned about what other people think, and I just danced for myself, this was the moment where I really felt like me. And I think this is what attracted you to watching me on the dance floor. Because since then, many people said, Karolina, like you've been professional trained, or you have done some dancing background. I don't. But I just allow myself to be fully me on the dance floor. And I think this makes the difference. Because I shed the armor, I show raw as I am. And I think this is something that attracted me to you at the beginning as well. You were just saying things as they are. And this was very liberating. This was the thing that I appreciate about you, that I could learn from you as well. I was like, okay, Cindy is not trying to pretend. She is who she is. And sometimes it comes as raw, but this is what empowers us.
You know, Karolina, just hearing you say this, I think it's such a beautiful story. I'm glad we have this recorded. And actually, one of my goals for the new year is to get into a dancing class. And now, after hearing you say this, I'm like, I have to do it, because I think I'm one of those people who love music and I love dancing, but I've never really gotten into doing it regularly. So what you've shared has really inspired me. So yes, I am going to do that.
And as imperfect as it is, embrace the joy, embrace the flow of it, embrace the fact that it is a process, it is a journey, right?
It is. Yeah. I mean, even if you're ugly, so what, right? No one is going to, nobody's expecting you to be doing a performance on Dirty Dancing. So yeah, we can be ugly dancers. Who cares?
Yeah, unless you want to do Dirty Dancing later because you discovered that actually you are a dancer as well.
I secretly want to do that. That's actually one of my favorite movies.
I love that movie as well.
It's one of the best movies out there. So, you know, I really want to sort of take us back to the fear at the workplace. And I think a lot of the fears that we have, and, you know, viewers, you can think about this as well, it's really the fear of stepping up. Whether is it a new project or stepping into a leadership role, you know, there are so many fears that stop us, right? So I think about what you mentioned earlier, the fear of being imperfect, the need to sort of appear strong at all times and sort of be a warrior and not being able to show your scars and your wounds. That's so difficult. And I remember the fears that I struggled with, and I believe, you know, the viewers, you will struggle with these few fears as well. The first one is the fear of failure. So the fear of failure is, what if I mess up? What if I don't meet the expectations? So that's one. The second very common fear is the fear of judgment. Yeah, what if people think that I'm stupid? What if they think that I'm not competent enough? And then the other very common fear is that the fear of even success, right? Like, what if I get there and I don't make it? Or what if I reach that level and I can't sustain it? So I really just want to talk a little bit about sort of like this mindset of fear. And, you know, after many years of learning about emotional intelligence, I realized that, you know, fear isn't something to fight with, it's something to work with. So a couple of questions that we can ask ourselves is that, what is this fear trying to tell you? Maybe it's trying to highlight something that's important for you. Maybe it's also trying to protect you from something. So ask yourself this critical question, and fear doesn't mean you're not ready. It just actually means you really care about something.
Absolutely.
And this caring is really the beginning of growth. Yeah. And one of the sneakiest lies we tell ourselves about fear, and confidence and fear is kind of like, a two-edged thing that comes together, right? So how do we build confidence? And very often when I coach my clients, people will say things like, I'm not ready yet. So while I get that there is a time for readiness, but there is never a perfect time to be ready, right? So I do want to talk about the fact that, confidence is not the starting point. It's really the byproduct. It's not the appetizer, but it's the dessert. So when we think about the confidence-competence loop, is that before we even feel confident, we need to take the action first. So one small step at a time, one conversation at a time, one bite at a time. So bite-sized nibbles of bravery. Yeah, and the big thing about this is even if it's messy, it's better messy than you being motionless. So my question to you is, how has this been for you? Before we transition to our next topic of feedback, what has this been like for you?
All right, so there's a lot of ideas that you talked about that they really resonate with me because I've been there, I've tried that, and from experience, I do agree that it will get messy. If you are getting into something new, you need to expect that you will feel uncomfortable, and this is absolutely normal. But this discomfort also tells you that you are trying something, that you are trying to step up, you are trying to do something different. And I realized, and this was big realization, that we actually scare things that we care about more. So for example, if you are going for a job interview and you have an interview that maybe you want to try the job, but you are not sure, you are waiting for the company to convince you that this is a good opportunity, you probably won't be too scared because you don't know yet if you want the job, right? So you go more relaxed for interview and you just try your best. But now imagine you are going for an interview and this is your dream job in a dream company. As you felt that way on Sunday before your important presentation to the client, right? I guarantee if you have it on Monday, Sunday, you will already get anxious and you will think about it and you will be like, I really want that particular job. I really want to get it. How do I impress them the way that they see the potential in me? And it is much more stressful. But what I also discovered, and it makes it really beautiful and it makes it a great reminder, that within the word, I'm so scared, why are you scared? There is the word care. Scared. There's the word care, right? You are scared because you care about that particular purpose. You care about this goal. You care so much that it makes you more anxious. So actually, it's okay to be anxious and it's okay to be uncomfortable. And I discovered that it's more like how you deal with discomfort, that you accept, you recognize the discomfort and you accept it. And then you find some ways of dealing with discomfort rather than shying away and waiting for the moment that, oh, I will feel ready. Because there were many moments in my life where I didn't feel ready. But I've taken the step. And that first step empowered me. So I put my mind onto something and I took that first step. And even though it was scary, it was already liberating because you know that you are moving. And it will be messy, it will be imperfect. It's like you will learn a lot in the process, right? It's the beginning of something beautiful, right? If you want to grow, actually I believe that if you are in the comfort zone, you are not growing. If you are comfortable, you are not growing. So you must get discomfort, you must get uncomfortable in order to grow. So I think it might serve as a good reminder.
So Karolina, we talked about discomfort earlier, and I think discomfort is something that we all face. And one thing I just wanted to put a little bit more focus on is leadership discomfort. And I remember people coming to me and I've got coaches telling me that, hey, I'm only 28 years old and I've just got promoted. I don't feel good enough. I've got imposter syndrome. The people that report to me are even older and more senior than me. Have you had an experience like that before in your journey, and how would you deal with something like that?
I actually feel that this is like a big thing for many leaders. It's one of the biggest fears, right? Because quite often as we progress in our career, we are getting promoted because we are really good at something. We build the expertise, we've proven ourselves to be reliable. And through this journey, we might have not really tackled how do we become better leaders. Maybe we didn't learn the skills. Quite often we lack the training to become a leader. And then at one day, you get the promotion, and there's this big moment that you get the promotion, right? But I see when I go to the room full of leaders, some leaders, like actually most of them, feel at the back of their head, do I have what it takes to be a great leader? And everyone is looking for something like a magic recipe on how to be a leader, right? So when we talk about different leadership styles, when we talk about different qualities you can bring to leadership, quite often there's a relief, there's a sigh of relief in the room because people discover, oh, maybe there's no one size fits all when it comes to being a leader. Maybe who I am, I can maximize my strengths and then work on the areas that I need to improve in order to become better. But I don't need to be like this one type of leader that everyone thinks like, oh, this is the way to go. There are many paths to become a great leader, right? So I think we all hold a little bit of, do I have what it takes to be a great leader, a great parent, a great person, a great professional? And for leaders, even for higher levels, some leaders get promoted to C-level. And they are sitting on the board and they're like, oh, I'm pretty new here. I'm not sure I have what it takes to be C-level executive as well, right? So it happens on every level. But I think realizing that we all have it, firstly, acknowledging the fact, right? And then thinking, okay, how can I identify what are my strengths, what I'm bringing to the table, and how I can maximize that, how I can give some of my gifts to the board or to my team. And it's good to kind of like identify what are your strengths. For example, throughout my journey, I discovered that energy is one of my strengths. I bring a lot of good, warm, welcoming energy, and it makes people more comfortable. It makes them feel better. So, for example, energy started to be my thing. And I also cheer people on their journey. And I think this is how a lot of friendships developed for me, also professional relationships, that I cheer people on. I'm like, Cindy, I'm so happy for you. You accomplished something. I cheer you on. Go ahead and do more of this, right? So I think identifying what are your strengths and maximizing them, it's already a great starting point to being a great leader. And there's no one quality or one style or one type of leader that you need to be. I think this is liberating, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I love the fact that there isn't a strict rule to say that, hey, I have to be a Barack Obama. I don't have to be a Donald Trump. I don't have to be a Jacinda Ardern. You can actually be your own leader, and that really comes with getting to know yourself better, knowing what are your strengths, knowing what are your unique gifts, and you just bring your own special concoction into this leadership.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so, as we talk about leadership, I think a big part of a lot of what we are uncomfortable about is really this idea of feedback. Yeah, I'm sure you've experienced that before, whether you're leaders or employees, we all need to at some point give someone feedback, or we need to receive feedback. Why is that so uncomfortable? I remember there was one time, and this was years ago, somebody wanted to give me a piece of feedback. On the outside, I was like, okay, I'm okay with feedback, but on the inside, I'm like, do I really want to know what this person thinks of me? So why do you think it's so awkward for us, and how have you kind of dealt with this in the feedback journey of yours?
Oh, this is difficult because usually feedback kind of validates some of our fears, right? Like if you know that something didn't work so well and someone gives you the piece of their mind on the top of the feeling that you already know, it only validates that you are not good enough for you, right? So sometimes feedback hurts. Feedback gives you the stink of kind of like, oh, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to know. But actually feedback can be a gift if it's well-meaning. If the person that is giving you feedback, you trust that person. Because I've also gotten the feedback that was totally unconstructive, right? Someone told me, your voice is very masculine. what can I do about that, right? I can improve my tone, I can improve my pace, my pitch, but what can I do about the sound of my voice, right? It only makes me more self-conscious. And, so some pieces of feedback that people give you, they're just an opinion. It is not a fact, it is an opinion. So be a little bit careful which piece of feedback you are trying to implement, or which pieces of feedback you are concerned about, because there are some pieces of feedback that are constructive, and it's good to listen to feedback. It's good to kind of be perceptive to feedback, right? Because I had a client, she wanted to become a leader. She was very high performer, but every time she got the feedback from her manager, it actually impacted her confidence level. She was more self-conscious after, and she felt that her manager is trying to put her down. But after talking to her manager, I realized that her manager wanted to help her. That's why she was getting her feedback, because she wanted to give her feedback she can improve, and then she will be ready, more ready for the position of being a leader, of presenting to the board of directors. But that person, every time, she was taking feedback very personally. So I think it's good to kind of say, okay, feedback is the opinion. It's good to take the feedback that it is constructive, that you can do something about it. But at one point, at the beginning it will hurt, but at one point you need to say, okay, what can I do about this feedback? If there's something I can do, something I can improve, I will do that. If there's nothing I can do about how my voice sounds, right? There's little I can do about that. I need to let it go. So constructive feedback, the one that you can act on, I think it's good to be open to it. And as the client case shows, she had to deal with that. She had to kind of draw a distance between, okay, I'm getting the feedback. This is not very personal. I'm getting the feedback because my manager really wants me to do better. And knowing that the feedback was well-meant feedback for her growth and for her development, right? So it is difficult at the beginning, but you learn how to embrace it. And then you know that if it's well-meaning feedback, it is a gift.
It absolutely is. I really like what you said about how sometimes we can be very sensitive and we take things very personally, and there will be time for us to accept the feedback. And there will be times where we might actually have to tell ourselves, how do we dissociate, right? Because when a person shares with you feedback, sometimes it's not about your character and who you are, but it's about a certain action that can be changed. And we are not necessarily our actions, right? Because our actions can change, right? Today I can smile, tomorrow I can show a gloomy face. So these are little things that we can change. And I do want to just sort of reiterate to say that we want to also be very careful about listening to feedback, because like what you mentioned earlier, not all feedback deserves our time, right? If this person that gives us feedback is somebody that we trust and respect, then of course, right? I'm not going to be taking feedback from any random Tom, Dick, Harry, or Ronnie on LinkedIn, or on Instagram, on Facebook. I'm going to drive myself crazy. So I think asking yourself this question, is this person worthy of your trust and respect? I think that's one. Do we want to listen or close our ears to this person? And the second thing is, like what you mentioned earlier, if somebody gives you a piece of feedback and they don't give you a solution, it's like telling you, your voice is too masculine, nothing I can do about it. It becomes like a critique and not really a conversation. So again, that's not helpful. Shut your ears to that. And the third thing I would also ask myself is, and I thought Brené Brown said this very well, is this person giving the feedback also in the trenches with you? Experiencing the same kind of challenges, getting beaten up in the boxing ring, suffering the same kind of torture, like speakers we understand. I'm not going to go to somebody else who's an engineer and ask him for feedback about how I spoke. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but he just doesn't understand. So I think being able to choose the correct person to listen to feedback and the kind of feedback to accept has been very important.
And also, I think, Cindy, still keeping in mind that we are all different, right? So feedback, even from well-meaning person you trust, who also might be a speaker, but they have very different style. They might give you feedback from their perspective. So we also need to be a little bit careful, because sometimes they look from their perspective. You ask 5 more other people who you trust and their opinion will be different. So, if you hear it the first time, I wouldn't be too quick to act on it. Sometimes I double check with other people as well what they think, because different people, for example, have different preferences. Different people like different styles. Some people told me like, oh, Karolina, you have too much of energy. You need to tone down. Some people told me like, oh, I love your energy. You need to bring that up, right? So it really does depend. And I like what you said about, is this something that you can change? If it's behavior, you can change that. If it's something that it would be difficult to change, or it's part of you and you don't want to change, then don't worry about that. Just thinking about it, yesterday the client told me, the session you ran, it was great, but it was very positive. Next time, I would like to see more talking about the challenges. And I was like, oh, that's a great piece of feedback. Thank you. It made me aware that maybe I kind of like made it a little bit too positive without looking at the real challenges or kind of like going deeper into the challenges. And I'm like, okay, next time I'm running the session, I will be more attuned, more more kind of observant when it comes to what are the difficulties, what are the challenges, and then we circle back to the positives at the end of the session, right? So there are pieces of feedback that you really need to hear and you really need to take on board because they make your work so much better.
Yes, yes, yes.
So I think over time, if we are willing and open-minded to accept that feedback, and we build some confidence around it as well, because like if you have low confidence and you are already thinking like, am I good enough? Do I have what it takes? And someone gives you feedback, then it will hurt even more.
Yeah,
because your low confidence get like even lower.
That's right.
Because you think like, oh, I knew I'm not good. And someone validates that I'm not good, right?
Yes, yes.
So it's good to start with your confidence level. And if you feel grounded, if you feel okay about yourself or good about yourself, then it hurts less. And then you can more embrace the feedback. You can say, okay, give me feedback. And I want to know how to do it better. Because over time you can adjust, you can refine, especially behaviors, the skills, the mindset.
Yes.
You can refine, you can tweak that.
You know, I really appreciate you sharing about this feedback that you've just gotten from a client. It sounds that that's very objective, right? They told you something that you did well, something that you can do better, and it's immediately something you can change.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I do want to kind of sort of transition this a little bit more to our perspective of feedback and also kind of like putting ourselves in the shoes of somebody who has given us feedback before. And I remember an experience, this was probably about 2 years ago. Somebody in my family gave me a piece of feedback and it wasn't comfortable at all for me. You know how we and family members is quite different. We're a lot closer, right? So this person gave me a piece of feedback and told me that I communicated in a way that was very abrasive. Yeah, so hands up guilty. I can be very abrasive. So this person told me about this feedback and I did not like it. I was not happy. And I had that bitch mode activated. I remember telling myself, I'm going to communicate in whatever way I want, okay? If you don't like it, you can go and fly a kite. You know, I'm not going to listen to you at all. So I was really kind of reactive and defensive in the way I came across to this person. But for some strange reason, that night, I just couldn't sleep. It kind of kept brewing in my head. And a couple of questions sort of came into my mind. And the first one was, does this person have good intentions when he was giving me this feedback? That was one. The second question I asked myself was, did I get so angry because it really stung the middle of my ego? And my answer was yes also. And the third question I asked myself is, if I were to change this part of me, will it help me to grow?
Oh.
Wow, I asked myself these three questions and to that my heart actually said yes, yes, yes. And I remember waking up the next day and I went to this person and I said, hey, I apologize, and I do agree that that's something that I have to work on. It wasn't easy, but I think for us as speakers, coaches, and trainers, we have to really work on ourselves before we can work on other people. So I do want to say that, when you're being given a piece of feedback, also understand that the person who gives the feedback is also taking a risk, right?
Yeah.
Because in an Asian culture, it's very easy to just keep quiet and say, you know what, you're all good. Nothing's wrong with you. Go carry on with your life. It's very easy to say that. But it takes courage and it takes honesty and sincerity to say, you know what, I want to be very honest with you. I think there's this thing that, we could all work on. Yeah, that's one. And the second thing is to ask yourself, do you think this person has got good intentions? If the intention is pure, sometimes it might not be perfect because not all of us are trained to be perfect feedback givers, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so give the person a bit of grace. And I think the third thing to understand is that, very often how we react to feedback is also from our own insecurities. So to ask ourselves, say, is this hitting our ego? Is it from our insecurity? And I think there's a lot of deep work and reflections in there as well.
Oh, wow. But I'm so in awe of your courage that you went back to that person and you admitted, like, okay, I'm sorry that I behaved how I did, but I actually accept that and I need to work on myself, because it takes a lot of courage, right? On the other side of fear, there's courage. And sometimes we feel like, oh, are we really willing to go and admit that we're on the wrong? And are we going to kind of like do something about it? And I think it takes a lot of courage. And the second point I want to make, because you mentioned that we as speakers, as coaches, as leaders, right, really need to know what triggers us. And you work a lot with like emotions and emotional regulation. And I think that's a very important point, to kind of recognize what are the things, for example, feedback, that triggers us. Why it triggers us so much? Why do we need to defend? Or sometimes we don't defend ourselves. Sometimes we blame other people. We say, it wasn't me, it was the other person, right? All these things, all these triggers are coming in place as a leader, as a speaker, but they come in place, for example, when you are under a lot of pressure. You might throw someone under the bus because, you are trying to protect yourself, right? So being aware of this, mastering this, and one way of like knowing if you are getting somewhere is like, how do you behave under pressure as well, right? Because it can get the worst of you if you are really stressed because of the work, deadlines, and everything. And with family members, you probably we get triggered a little bit more as well, because they know us better, and quite often they have good intentions, but sometimes we've heard so much feedback from them that we just don't want to accept anymore.
So we get doubly triggered when it's a family member.
Double triggered. Double triggered. But it's also good to know that we get triggered, right? And to do something to deal with the triggers and to know why we got triggered and what we can do about it.
And sometimes it's from the other person. We feel that, hey, who are you to tell me, right? So there's sometimes a lot of ego, there's pride, and all that actually comes into play. So I think the ability to reflect and self-correct is really important. So, this is when I just want to kind of bring us to this thing about, so if somebody is struggling with fear and they're lacking courage and confidence, what could be some of the things that we can do? So if somebody now comes to us and say, okay, I hear what you say about fear. Now I know how to deal with it, in the sense that I know how to perceive it. But what are some little tangible action steps that I can take to build confidence and build courage so that I can show up a little bit more myself with more presence at work? What would be some tips you would give people who really want to build courage and confidence in very tangible ways?
All right, this is a great question, and there are lots of ways you can build your confidence and your courage, right? One thing that definitely worked for me, it was exposure. Taking the small step forward. And I think we talked about taking the step forward, right? Even though it will be imperfect, even though this is the first step, you still take that step. You still take that little risk, and you accept the fact that, over time, you will feel more comfortable with something that you felt uncomfortable at the beginning. For example, when I wanted to be a speaker, I already had a little bit of confidence, but I knew, I cannot be a speaker just yet. I don't have confidence to present to a big group of people, right? But I decided to take it one step at a time, and I signed up for Toastmasters. And this is where I was doing the first speech, felt really scary, and I was paralyzed. The second speech, I felt already a little bit better. People gave me a lot of positive feedback, a lot of support and appreciation for the fact that I've done it in the language that is not my first language, right? Also, some concern might be coming from the fact that, for example, for me, for a lot of people, for a lot of leaders, English is second or even third language, right? So this was the kind of take step by step. This was something that I practiced quite a lot. And I also practice it with my kids, because my kids, they are 6 and 8 at the moment. I expose them to different experiences to show them that it's not that scary after all. And if you do it in one step at a time, over time you can see the journey and you can admire how much you grow from taking one small step at a time and facing that fear rather than procrastinating or avoiding. Because what I realized when I realized I have a lot of fear, what I realized I was actually procrastinating or avoiding a lot of opportunities And I kind of like, I thought maybe they're not so important. But at the end of the day, I have a little bit of regret about the things that I missed because I didn't want to face the fear. I didn't want to face the discomfort. So talking about building confidence and courage, what is the thing that worked for you, Cindy?
So that's a great question because, every time, there have been situations where people just come and say, just be confident, just be courageous. Like, how do you freaking do that, right? Like, give me some tips to actually do that. So one of the things I usually tell my participants, my coaches, and this was also an advice that has been given to me, is like what you mentioned earlier, the exposure therapy. So I always say, hey, if you're somebody that's afraid of speaking up at work, what if you can do this incremental asking? So what it means is that, okay, today you're in a meeting for the month of January. Now we're in December, right? So for the month of January, what you're going to do is every time you're in a meeting, you're just going to focus on asking one question at a time. Just one tiny question, okay? So start with that, and then February, you focus on asking 2 questions during the meeting. Yeah, so just 2 questions for the entire month, and then by March, you ask 3 questions in the meeting. And then I remember giving this suggestion to one of my coaches, and by the end of 6 months, she was confidently leading the conversation. So that was one. And the second thing I thought would be also very interesting is that sometimes you really don't have questions to ask, and you don't want to be just asking a very random question like, what's for lunch? It's going to be really weird, right? So rather than asking a random question, you can also summarize what has been said. Yeah, so be a good listener, choose to be present, and that's already very powerful. You can then just say something like, I realize that the team is leaning towards the choice of this venue because it meets everyone's criteria. So what we're doing is that we're rephrasing what people have said, and that's also another way of being able to share your voice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the third thing that I thought could be very interesting is, and this has worked for me powerfully as well, is the ability to speak up for someone else. I realized that sometimes when we speak up for ourselves, it can feel a little bit like scary or selfish or overbearing. But what if you can be the voice for somebody who doesn't have a voice? Maybe you can speak up for that colleague of yours who is not the best communicator, but this person is such a hard worker and has got such a good character. Speak up for that person. Is there a certain group of people that you are very passionate to help? It could be a group of special needs children. It could be a group of girls that are delinquent. There are a lot of people who judge groups of people like that. Yeah, so you could be the one speaking on behalf of these groups of people. And when we find the courage to speak up for someone else, it also increases the courage in ourselves.
I resonate with that deeply because I think connecting with what is really meaningful to you, it's also a way to build courage. If you know that something is very important and you are standing up for this and it aligns with your values, with your purpose, you know that this is important cause and you speak on behalf of this really empowers you and it creates bigger impact. So I think knowing what aligns with you. And also this is connected to build on that idea. When sometimes people ask me, Karolina, how do I make sure I'm coming across as courageous and confident during presentations? I tell them, imagine that you are bringing a gift to the audience. Think of your presentation not as words, but as a gift, as a value you are going to offer. And then when you think of that gift, then you will get more confident because you connect with a thing like, oh, I'm going to help them. I'm bringing them a gift. They're going to love it because it's going to make their life better. So there are a number of things, but I think thinking of the gift, thinking about your purpose and empowering, standing up for other people, it's a great way to gain more confidence with what you are doing. And through exposure as well, right? You expose yourself to different experiences. And firstly, I would start with low pressure situations. For example, asking one question instead of stepping up and saying, oh, I will run that meeting, I will moderate that meeting, right? Because for a lot of people, moderating, it will be very scary. If you just set your mind on, it is one question, or it is just the summary, it's so much easier to tackle, right?
Yeah, correct. I love that. Imagine if somebody doesn't have confidence and courage and you say, run the meeting, just poop in my pants right there. Not gonna happen. So, I love what you said about it being a gift and connecting it to your purpose. I think when we connect our voice to something that is bigger than us, it becomes more powerful because now it's no longer just about you,
Exactly.
Yeah, you're just kind of doing this for the greater group, a group of people that you're passionate about helping. And this kind of brings me to the next question. I do want to talk about fears in meeting new people, fears in networking events, because I think, you and I, we both do training and speaking, and very often we have participants that come to us and they say, hey, I'm an introvert, I don't really enjoy meeting people. What are some things I can do to make myself more confident and comfortable when I'm in a meeting full of people that I don't know? It could be a town hall where there are people from other departments. It could be a networking event where I'm there maybe alone or just with one friend. So what tips would you give to somebody who's experiencing that kind of discomfort? And what can they do to help themselves be better networkers and be better at meeting new people?
I have my own secrets around how do I do that. And the reason is I relocated from country to country. I relocated 4 or 5 times. And every time I relocated to new country, I had to make friends. I had to build relationships. So I went to a lot of rooms where I felt everyone else in the room, they are strangers. And quite often I was lacking on confidence. But I also realized if I come early, if I will be an early bird in the room, and I hang out nearby the place where people, nearby the door where people enter, and I observe them first, and I realize that a lot of people actually, when they are coming to these meetings, when they don't know other people, they feel uncomfortable. If you shift your attention from your own discomfort onto them and making them feel comfortable, if you give them a smile, welcome them, show them to the coffee, make a small introduction between yourself and themselves, it makes them feel comforted, it makes them feel good, they will remember you. And over time, in that room, you've created a number of friends, right? You made already friends because you made them feel good as they enter the room. And this became my little strategy that I use every time I go for networking event, every time I go for my own talk. If I go to the room where I don't know anyone, I don't want to present to strangers. Because people tell me oh, it's really scary to present to strangers, right? I don't want to present to strangers. Why would I present to strangers? I want to present to friends. How do you present to friends? You come early and you welcome anyone who comes through the door. You give them a smile, you make them feel comfortable, you welcome them as you are the host, right? So I call this strategy being a host. Even though you don't need to be a host, but you host them. And if you adopt this, you shift your attention onto them, you make them feel comforted, then, for example, when you present, they will root for you because you made them feel comfortable at the beginning and you made friends with them. So they will root for you as well during the presentation. And you don't need to know everyone in the room, if it's a big room, a lot of people, but you know a couple of people already. So I think it really helps. And over time, I also noticed that because I welcome a couple of people, later, people who came later, they also had seen me as well connected because other people interacted with me very naturally. And they said, Karolina, it seems like you know everyone in the room. I'm not really, I just met them. But this is something that really helps.
I really love what you mentioned about being the host, right? So you're kind of allowing yourself to sort of step up to a certain role that actually wasn't there, but you allow yourself to, and that helps bring confidence as well, right?
Yep.
So, I really enjoyed what you said about taking the lead of the role of the host. I think it's one thing to step up to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to take on this role. Nobody's taking, but it's a secret role, like I'm a secret agent. And I think it really helps to empower ourselves and make us a lot more confident. Yeah, so I really like that, and I'm going to steal that, okay? And, spoiler alert, when you talked about, you're putting the focus on other people rather than yourself. And, I do want to share this with everybody. Nobody is really thinking about you, right? We are really only thinking about ourselves, right? We go into a networking event and sometimes we are so conscious about, hey, what am I going to say? Am I going to say something that's really dumb? What will people think about me? So what if we can shift our focus from ourselves to the person outside instead? Yeah, so I think that becomes very powerful. I also love what you said about, sort of being the connector. Yeah, and one way that we can do that is to be responsible for introducing people to another, right? So you meet the first person, this person's name could be Sally. And then when you're having a conversation with Sally, you both can introduce yourself to somebody and say, hey, Sally, meet Peter. Do you know that, both of you are in tech, so you might like to talk about AI, right? So I think the idea of taking up the host, putting focus on other people and introducing others become very, very powerful. So at the end of the day, it's not about just, performing to impress, but it's being very, very present at that situation. So now will be a good time for us to go into the engagement and fun segment.
Oh.
Yeah. So we are going to be asking each other some quick fire questions about the topic of fear, courage, and confidence. So each person will get about 5 seconds to answer. So maybe Karolina, I'll let you ask me the first 5 first, then I'll ask you the next 5. How about that?
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
So Cindy, if fear were an animal, what would it be?
Oh, wow. It would be a white tiger with saber tooth. Because it's rare and actually quite sexy at times.
Oh,
I don't know where that came from, but yeah, that.
All right, finish this sentence. Confidence feels like
A liberating breath of fresh air along with a pint of beer.
Oh.
Nice, relaxing, empowering.
What's scarier for you, failure or rejection?
Rejection. For me, it's definitely rejection. Of course, failure can be also both rejection at the same time, but I think being rejected can be very hurtful because it goes straight into the heart. But failure, it could be just, a task that I haven't done well and I might not take it so personally.
What's your go-to strategy for boosting your confidence just before a big moment?
Pray. Pray, listen to Christian songs. That helps me all the time.
What's a movie or a book that inspired you to become more courageous?
The Greatest Showman.
Oh.
Yeah, and I know that's a song that you like as well. Yeah, so I think the song This Is Me, whenever I listen to it just before I step into a very scary situation, actually makes me cry.
Beautiful.
Powerful.
All right, done. 5 done.
Okay, what's scarier for you, public speaking or parallel parking?
Parallel parking.
Nope.
I was going to choose that as well.
But it is because of exposure. I have more exposure to public speaking. That's why it's less scary.
That's so cute. Thank you so much. What's the last thing you did that made your palms sweat before today?
Before today, actually, I get nervous in some networking events and social situations where I'm kind of like maybe sometimes a little bit overwhelmed with everything that's going on. I recently realized that I'm quite sensitive to loud noise. I don't like too much noise. So this makes me kind of like a little bit anxious with like sweaty palms and trying to run away from the situation.
When there's a lot of people, and then there's a lot of noise at the same time.
A lot of noise then makes me feel like, run away.
Okay, have you ever pretended to know something in a meeting and how did it go?
Never goes well. Yes, I pretended because, as I mentioned, the previous version of me was the warrior. And as a warrior, you cannot admit that you are wrong or that you took the wrong path, the wrong strategy. So they were situations where I pretended, but it never goes wrong. So I wouldn't recommend that. And now I try to be more truthful. And I think it's absolutely fine to admit I don't know, but I will find out for you. I don't know the answer.
Let me know the next time. Okay, and the final one. If fear were a person, what nickname would you give it?
Fearsome.
What?
It would be fearsome. Because,
Fearsome.
Yeah, because some would be for handsome, maybe handsome. But fear would be still fear. But as I mentioned, like it's about embracing the fear. So now I'm not scared of being scared. Because this is the thing as well. Sometimes we can be scared because we know that there's something scary coming, right? Yes. But just kind of accepting that. And probably I would hug that person the same way as I hug everyone else. Like, I haven't seen you for such a long time. Welcome.
You know, I love what you said about this fearsome and we don't have to be scared of being scared. I think that's very powerful and I would like all of you to remember that. And you know, Karolina, it has been such a powerful conversation. Thank you for bringing your heart, your energy and insight to this session of the Own Your BS show. We've covered quite a lot of things. We've talked about fear, right? How it can paralyze us or push us forward. We've talked about feedback, how to handle it, how to grow from it. And we have also talked about how to tackle courage, how can we build it step by step, driven by purpose and intention too. So to our viewers, my question to you is, what's one takeaway that you're excited to apply? And here's a little challenge for the week. What's one small act of courage and confidence that you'd like to take today? Because that's really where the magic and the growth happens. So thank you for joining me today, Karolina, and thank you everyone for joining us on the Own Your BS show. I'm Cindy Tien, and I'll see you in the next episode. You need to like grab your booger or something. I'm such a booger person. Okay, me and my booger stories.
Oh, the microphone is like...
Sorry. So you're sort of stepping up. Yay!